Well, greetings and salutations. I'm Scott Allison. This is Beyond 280. This is the show where we go beyond the 280 characters of Twitter and get to know the people and the topics and the trends behind that character limit so that maybe we can, open people's eyes a little bit to what's really going on in the world and what's really going on social media. Again, my name is Scott Allison. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching me. I've been doing this for 2.5 months or so, and I'm trying to get more consistent at this, and I think I'm getting there. And I'm hoping that in the next week or so to unveil some new stuff, I'm going to be releasing some shorter videos on the days that I don't stream, so that I can kind of give you kind of some daily updates on what's going on in Twitter and what's going on behind those 280 characters. So again, thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. What we're going to talk about today is my home state, the greatest state in the union, Texas. That's right. I get it. There's a lot of people hate Texas. I understand. They hate our bravado. They hate our pride, our big pickup trucks, our politics. I definitely hate the heat. Well, hell, I hate the heat. I've lived here all my life and near the Houston area, or in and around the Houston area, and I've hated the Texas heat as far back as I can remember. I could tolerate it more when I was a kid, but now that I'm an old man, it's not so much fun. But yeah, the other thing is we get stereotyped mercilessly in this state from outside the state, of course. And because in Texas we all have horses. There are tumbleweeds rolling down the street. We all have a drawl. We all talk like this. We say y'all. We all wear cowboy boots and cowboy hats. Our skin is like leather because we're outside all the time, baking in the hot Texas sun. And there's longhorn cattle grazing in our backyards, in all our backyards. Anybody who has a backyard in this state has longhorn cattle back there just munching on some grass. Yeah, and even the women here, they chew tobacco and rope broncos. So I mean, that's just Texas in a nutshell, basically. No, it's not. Now, anybody who's actually been to Texas and has kind of fell for those stereotypes knows that Texas is quite diverse. It's not all the things that you think it is. Now, of course, there's a lot of that because it's Texas. But if you start going into the cities and you start going into East Texas and West Texas and down in the valley and all that, it's different in every place you go. It's almost like it's its own country. Imagine that. So, again, all this hate and stereotypes and stuff, it comes with the territory of being a Texan. I get that. We know that we're kind of a target. And, lots of people hate Texas in much the same way that people hate New York Yankees, right? And all those like 30,000 World Series victories or whatever. Or maybe it's really kind of like hating Tom Brady. I mean, who really needs 7 Super Bowl rings? I mean, really, who needs 7 Super Bowl rings? I mean, that's exactly what hating Texas is like because, well, we're exceptional, and people hate exceptional things. What can I say? I'm from Texas. I've got a lot of pride. So, all of this is because Texas is just awesome. It's just awesome. We're awesome. Texas is awesome. Well, we got some trolling here. I'm going to go ahead and add this. A little bit of trolling here. Kevin Michael Reed. Thank you, Kevin Michael Reed. Mr. Kevin Michael Reed, folks. It's okay. We can give Texas back to Mexico. Okay. That will never happen, but thanks for playing. So why is Texas awesome? Well, let's just go over a couple of fun-filled facts, and you get an idea of why Texas is so awesome. So a lot of people probably know this, but Texas was its own country for about 9 years before it was annexed by the United States after winning independence from Mexico. Houston, Houston, well, the state really, but Houston specifically is considered the most diverse city in the United States. Many polls bear this out. Lots of census data bears this out. That's even more diverse than New York City. I can attest to this. By the way, you know what? The number one language here is still English. Number two language is Spanish. You know what the number three language is? Vietnamese. It's one of the largest Vietnamese populations in the United States. It's right here in the great state of Texas. So we're extremely diverse here. We have got some great founding companies that were founded here. Whole Foods was founded, over in Austin, Texas. I've been to the original Whole Foods store. In fact, I worked for Whole Foods when I was in my early 20s because it's a Texas institution. We love our Whole Foods here in Texas. Dr. Pepper, that alone makes Texas great. That Dr. Pepper was created and bottled here and invented here. And that's, by itself, Dr. Pepper gives Texas the cred. It just does. Texas is the second largest state in the union. A lot of people think Texas is the largest state. And the reason why people think that is because of the curvature of the earth and how we typically have drawn our United States maps. Alaska looks a little smaller than Texas, but when you actually, take Texas, you can actually fit Texas inside of Alaska with a lot of room to spare. Alaska is monstrous, but Alaska is also half frozen tundra. But neither here nor there. Texas is just big. It's just big. In fact, if you're in El Paso right now, you're actually closer to Los Angeles than you are the easternmost border of Texas, which is basically Orange, Texas, Vidor, Beaumont, all that. Vidor, oh, yes, we hate Vidor here too, even though it's part of Texas. Texas is home to the second. Yes, Dell. That's a good point. Dell Computer as well was established here for a long time. Compaq was headquartered here. We have a large Apple office here. We make Toyotas here. All the Toyota trucks that you get in the United States are made here in the great state of Texas. But some other facts: Texas has the second largest canyon in the United States. Everybody knows about the Grand Canyon, and it is grand. It is massive. And there's some other big canyons in this country, but Texas has the second largest one, the Palo Duro Canyon in the Texas Panhandle. Beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. I love the Palo Duro Canyon. We also have, not one, we have two national parks in the state of Texas. We have 3 of the top 10 most populated cities in the United States: Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio in that order, with Austin quickly bringing up the rear. Our state capitol building, I think there's some sort of unwritten law about your state capitol buildings cannot exceed the size of the United States Capitol building. Well, yeah, Texas was like, screw you, Washington, D.C. Our Texas State Capitol building is 15 feet higher. Now, it's modeled very similarly to the U.S. Capitol, but they just said, you know what, stick another 15 feet on this sucker. And another one that's kind of an interesting tidbit, if you didn't know, we have the largest bat colony right here in Texas. That's in the United States. The largest bat colony I cannot speak today. The largest bat colony in the United States is here in Texas, and it is a sight to behold. So there's a couple places where you can see these bats. It's fascinating. So there's a bridge in Austin that goes over one of the rivers there, and there's a massive number of bats that call the underside of that bridge home. There's also some caves, some old abandoned mines nearby as well. And they have this little tiny amphitheater that you can go on summer nights, like in late July and August. You can go in there and you wait and you sit there and you sit quietly, and down below you, like 200 feet is kind of the opening to where this mine shaft and caves are. And you sit there and you just sit there, and twilight starts to creep in, and then all of a sudden you hear, and then you see a bat. And he circled around. The trees kind of, make a circle, and then you see him circle around. And you see 2 or 3 more. And then all of a sudden, you smell something. It's kind of sweet and organic. And you kind of feel a light breeze. And then all of a sudden, like out of a freaking Batman movie, a just a swarm of bats come up out of the ground, and they start flying around you, and they're literally just, a couple feet over your head. They're flying around, spiraling up into the sky, going out to get their meals, which is mosquitoes, hopefully, because that's another thing. We have a huge mosquito problem here. So Texas is awesome. There's a lot of, those are just a few of the things that I wanted to highlight. So why am I bringing this up? I mean, Scott, your show's about Twitter. Yes, it is, and I have a reason. I have a method to my madness. So on Monday, Greg Abbott signed a bill into Texas law, and it is here's the tweet. So he signed this bill. He said, to keep Texas the best state in the nation, we can never forget why our state is so exceptional. It's exceptional. We're exceptional in Texas. We know it. He said, I signed a law establishing the 1836 Project. I see what you did there. Which promotes patriotic education and ensures future generations understand Texas values. Together, we'll keep our rich history alive. Okay, so I have some issues with this tweet. The first issue was not really an issue. It's just kind of, I think it's great. I love the rib here with the 1836 Project, which is a direct rib of the 1619 Project, and awesome. I love when people do stuff like this. It's just so funny. I know a lot of people got really upset by this, but whatever. Grow some skin, if you will. Thicken it up a little bit. But anyways, I thought that was pretty funny. But then he goes and says, which promotes patriotic education. Oh, extremely, extremely poor choice of words. He even says it in his, when he, does the ceremony, and he's got the lawmakers behind him and everything. And he even mentions it when he's signing it into law, that this is patriotic education. And I find that problematic. I don't like that wording. It's very dictator-esque, very Nazi-esque almost. Now, granted, there's no real Nazis in this country, but it sounds like something that Hitler would have said, or hey, we're gonna have some patriotic education. Now, don't get me wrong. I think it's fine to be patriotic, but let's use our words a little bit differently. Anywho, and ensures future generations understand Texas values. So we are a very proud state. I think I've mentioned this already. We're an extremely proud state, and we do have values here that we really are proud of in this state. Number one, we're welcoming of everybody. That's one of our values. We welcome everybody, and it's totally clear that this is the case. Even in rural areas, we welcome everybody. We're willing to set aside our differences and welcome somebody with open arms. It is a Texas thing. It's also a Southern thing, but with Texas, we kind of take it even a step further. Case in point, I love this about our state and our city. While cities across the United States were allowing protests to burn down buildings and take away other people's livelihoods and basically just run amok during the right after the George Floyd murder, and it was a murder. Then they tried to have some vigils and stuff like that. That all turned into violence. I'm so proud of our city, of our state, because we had a massive, massive rally here in the city of Houston, and no bottles were thrown. Nothing was set on fire. No cars were overturned. Nobody was attacked. No police officers were, hurt. Nobody was throwing around racial slurs or being violent or anything like that. In fact, that there were people on the side of the street handing out free water instead of rocks or bricks, and it was amazing. Now, George Floyd was from Houston. A lot of people don't know that. They think Minnesota. No, he actually moved to Minnesota. He was from Houston, so all his family was from here, and and it was amazing. I watched it on TV and I was like, I'm so proud of my state and my city because we welcome everybody with open arms, and we're totally cool with you if you disagree with me. That's the way we are in Texas. Don't believe me? Move here for a little while and you will see. So yeah, so that's, Greg Abbott, came and he came out with that legislation, and immediately he started getting hate for that tweet. A lot of hate, and here's an example of that. So Mr. Mark Gerard, I don't know who this guy is. So a bunch of people moved into a country, many of them illegally. They flagrantly violated laws of the host country. They start an insurrection, and years later they become a part of another country. That Texas history, right? I'm gonna leave this up while I talk about this because one of the things that we do in this state pretty well, in fact, and I don't know how it is in other states, but we have in middle school, and when I was in school, it was in 7th grade. I think when my oldest 2 kids were in school, I think it was 7th grade. Maybe it's always been 7th grade, but you have a year's worth of Texas history because there's a lot to pack in a year. I mean, and they go back. They start with prehistoric Texas, and the fact that most of Texas was an ocean. So there's a lot of fossils and cool stuff here. But also, they talk about the indigenous peoples and the different tribes that were here. They talk about the conquistadors and the Spanish coming here and exploring, and our French roots and German roots and Spanish roots. Talk about colonization by Mexico, becoming a state of essentially a state of Mexico, if you will, and talked about the Revolutionary War and all of that stuff. They don't hide anything. And what Mark Gerard here is saying is absolutely just bullcocky. It's bullcocky. What actually occurred with Texas and where people came from mostly was from Mexico. Now, there were some United States people that came in and got land grants from the Mexican government and settled here and, lived in the Mexican country basically and paid their taxes and did their business and obeyed the laws and all that. And things were looking pretty good for Mexico at this point. And then Santa Anna came along. And Santa Anna, he was a snake, that's for sure, because he put himself forward as some sort of federalist, right? So as you know, in the United States, we're kind of a federalist system. And so he put himself out there that way and eventually was able to push the president of Mexico out of power and take power himself. And then he turned it on everybody and became a centralist, essentially taking all the power of the state and consolidating it unto him, also known as dictatorship. So he basically then said, if you're not from Mexico, you have no rights. Even though you've bought land, even though you obey the laws, even though you pay your taxes, even though you do all these things, you don't have any rights. In fact, I make the law. And so this became kind of interesting, became a lot like another Revolutionary War where there was no representation. Yeah, I think that happened before. Yeah. So this is the most blatant falsehood I've seen in a long time. It's just not based in any reality whatsoever. Then some big guns got involved. And one of my favorite big guns is Ida Bay Wells. Ida Bay Wells took the 1836 Project jab and said, "Oh, you hurt my feelings." And she posted a Texas Monthly article about how leaders of the Texas Revolution fought to preserve slavery. Of course, slavery came into the picture. It always does. It doesn't matter what state you're from. Slavery always comes into the picture with these people. So let me just say real quick something about slavery. Just a little bit about slavery. The United States, Texas included, practiced the evil of slavery. They did. It's a reality. It's absolutely a fact. Mexico did not, at least at this time. In fact, when the Revolutionary War was over, a lot of the Mexicans that decided to leave brought their slaves with them and set them free when they got to Mexico, because in Mexico it was illegal. In our state, we somehow made it legal, and I haven't gone into the full details on why it was still legal in our state of Mexico when we were still a part of Mexico. But when they went to Mexico proper, they basically couldn't have slaves anymore, so they set them free. And a lot of Mexicans stayed here and kept, or Tejanos, which were, basically Mexicans that were born in Texas, and they kept their slaves. And yes, part of the reasoning was the issue over slavery. Okay. And then we fought a civil war not too far after, and basically watched 750,000 people die in the process of getting rid of slavery. We have atoned for this. The United States and Texas has more than atoned for this. We've passed legislation. We've done everything we can to make it right, because we know, all of us know, that slavery was evil. Notice the word I used there, was, past tense. Let's move on. I get it. I understand. I understand that it sucks. The Holocaust sucked. But the Jewish people in this country and other parts of the world do not blame the Holocaust for every one of their woes. They don't. So they take control of their lives and they move forward. So that's my thoughts on slavery, and I'm going to leave it at that. So Ida Bay Wells can just basically go to hell, because her 1619 project is based on pretty much nothing. Academics have torn it to shreds. And academics of all political persuasions have torn it to shreds. So she has her voice carries no weight, especially here in the state of Texas. So all of that being said, is that there was another reply to his tweet, and this is the one that really got me and really why I wanted to talk to you today. Jacqueline Armendadis. Okay, Armendadis? I think I'm saying that right. Did y'all know... Oh, by the way, she's from Colorado. Did y'all know Texas won its revolution by attacking the Mexican army while they were sleeping, their traditional daily siesta of the culture, in a strategically vulnerable position? Real honorable victory, huh? The things they don't teach us in high school or in school. Guess what, Jacqueline? You're absolutely wrong. They actually taught us that. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why when I was, in 7th grade and I read that for the first time and we talked about it in class, I was just like, holy crap. I mean, we surprised an army that outnumbered us 2-1 when they were taking a nap? That's badass. How awesome is that? That we took advantage of that situation and basically won our independence because they were asleep in the middle of the day. But there's more to the story. There's more to the story. Of course, there's always more to the story. So you got to know a little bit about Texas history and kind of what led up to the Texas Revolutionary War, or specifically what led up to the Battle of San Jacinto, where all of this occurred. So, revolution kind of started here and there. There were skirmishes here and there, and there was one particular battle, the Battle of Coleto, which is south of Houston, down kind of close to Corpus Christi. And the Texas army lost. They lost big time. And so the Mexican army took roughly like 445 prisoners of war. Right? Well, They took these prisoners of war, and they marched them out of this fort, and they put them between two rows of Mexican soldiers where they were shot point blank. And the ones that survived that shooting, well, they were just clubbed and stabbed to death. 40 Texans were unable to walk. 39 were killed inside the fort. Fannin, who was the leader of this particular Texas group, was the last to be executed after seeing his men killed. He was taken by Mexican soldiers to the courtyard in front of the chapel, blindfolded and seated in a chair. He made 3 requests. He knew he was going to die. He made 3 requests: that his personal possessions be given to his family, that he be shot in the heart and not in the face, and to be given a proper Christian burial. The Mexican soldiers took his belongings, they shot him in the face, and then they burned his body along with the other Texans that were killed that day. This is called the Goliad Massacre. And this was Santa Anna who ordered this. Now there was a general who was of sound mind and not insane like Santa Anna was, who said, "Whoa," he questioned Santa Anna on this, said, "Whoa, we shouldn't be doing that. That's wrong." He's right. This was an evil perpetrated here. War is bad. Prisoners of killing, just massacring prisoners of war, just cause make a statement, is evil. And a lot of Mexican soldiers defected after this. They left the Mexican army. But this is what triggered the groundswell of emotion and just wanting to get back at the Mexicans, the Mexican army for this, and it led to the Battle of the Alamo. And I'm not going to go into the details there, but that was basically a slaughter. It was like 1,500 to 2,000 Mexican soldiers against like roughly 250 Texas soldiers in the Alamo, and they were all slaughtered. Now, it wasn't nearly the slaughter that there was in Goliad, but it was awful. So I say all that to kind of go back to Jacqueline. So what would you have Texas do in that situation? What would you have them do? Politely ask, "Hey, can we fight you now? Can we shoot at you?" No, of course not. The Sam Houston's army in the Battle of San Jacinto had to be held back when they did this, and even then they couldn't be held back. They committed some atrocities. They absolutely committed some atrocities here. So, at the Battle of San Jacinto, they were basically stationed in 2 different places near the San Jacinto River, the Texas Army and the Mexican Army. Throughout the night, the Mexican troops worked to fortify their camp, and then they added 540 reinforcements, which gave them about 1,500 men. The Texans had about half of that, maybe a little bit more than half. Most of these new recruits, were raw. They were inexperienced, and they basically marched these guys across the state to get to this battlefield for 24 hours straight, with no food, no stops, no rest. And as the morning wore on this day, on this very specific day, Texans didn't attack during that. Now, keep in mind, there were some skirmishes leading up to this, but there was no attack that particular morning. The Mexican officers all kind of lowered their guard a little bit. And by afternoon, Santa Anna, in his infinite wisdom, by the way, Santa Anna set them up for failure here because he actually put them in a very difficult position to defend. They were basically in an open field. And they had like the forest on one side and a river on another, and they were sitting there in an open field. They were basically sitting ducks. It was, there were Mexican tacticians of the day that said that Santa Anna basically used the tactic of a child. That's how they described it. Neither here nor there. So Santa Anna had given permission for his general's men to sleep. So going back and to Jacqueline's assertion that they were taking their traditional siesta as it was some sort of cultural thing. That's not true. The Mexican army had been run ragged, especially the new recruits that had come in. They just got through a 24-hour march where they couldn't stop or have food or anything. And to add on top of that, this was springtime in Texas, so it was getting hot and muggy. And the area that they were in, it was very marshy. And so they had to slog through mud to get to where they were. Through just wet bogs and marshes and swamps. And it was nasty and very hard, very difficult. I couldn't imagine doing something like that. So they came in, and Santa Anna said, okay, fine. Texans aren't attacking. We've got them outnumbered 2-1. Of course, he didn't know the numbers because the Texans were hiding their numbers pretty well at the time. But he assumed that it was probably going to be a slaughter. And so Santa Anna had given permission for those men to sleep. His own tired troops also took advantage of the time to eat, rest, and bathe. So they just kicked back and took it easy. This is considered, there's two things this is considered. Number one, it's considered one of the most lopsided victories of all time when the victory finally occurred. Number two is also considered one of the most amazing military blunders of all time by Santa Anna himself. What a moron, right? And this is why Texas is so fucking awesome. I'm going to use that word. So what happened next? Well, the Texan cavalry, or the Texian, we used to be called Texians here before we became Texans. Words, right? The Texian cavalry was first dispatched to the Mexican forces far left, and the artillery advanced through the tall grass to within 200 yards. The Texians' twin sisters, which were cannons, they always had nicknames for these cannons, fired at 4:30, beginning the battle. After a single volley, the Texians broke rank and swarmed over the Mexican breastworks, yelling, "Remember the Alamo, remember La Bahia," which was Goliad, which later became Goliad, but it was Goliad. These men were incensed, and they left no stone unturned. They went into the campsite and engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Because remember, this was a time where you kind of shot from afar, right? Mexican soldiers were taken by surprise. Of course, they were. They were in all sorts of disarray. Some of them were, kind of eating, and some of them were crashed out. Some of them were trying to take baths, which I'm not sure how you take a bath out in that situation, but they were trying to do it. And Santa Anna and his generals and leaders were trying to bark orders, and they couldn't get them organized. Couldn't get anybody organized. A bunch of Mexicans fled. The infantry forces advanced without halt until they had possession of the woodland. Which, again, remember, they had the woodland on one side and the river on the other. So they marched all the way through the Mexican army. The right wing and the left wing took forces. Their forces took possession of the breastwork, which was kind of, where the main body of the army was. Within 18 minutes. Keep in mind, this is 1836. So this is 1836. Within 18 minutes, the Mexican soldiers had abandoned their campsite and fled for their lives. Now, the last sentence here is the one that really kind of gets me, and I don't like it. It's the killing lasted 4 hours. And the reason why is because the Texan army, many of them Tejanos, by the way, were incensed. They were mad with rage over what had happened in the weeks prior to the Alamo and what happened at Goliad. So, again, I ask our good friend over here, Jacqueline, what would you have the Texan army do? What would you have them do? Now, if you'll remember, another famous general, because we were just talking about Sam Houston, another famous general, Mr. George Washington, he crossed a river in the middle of the night so that he could attack on Christmas morning. What do you say to that guy? Is there any honor in that? Of course not. You take advantage of whatever tactical situation you can. And in this case, the Texans took advantage of a worn-out army that had been driven for miles. Thinking, having this, the Mexican army thinking that they just kind of, we got this. Santa Anna specifically thinking, we got this. What more would you have them do, Jacqueline? Thank you, Alex. Likes to call us Texicals. We do have some massive Texicals in this country. There's no doubt about that. In this state. So yeah, so that kind of makes Texas great, right? So I don't know if you saw on the Twitter advertise or the YouTube advertisement, I put reason 10,348 or something why Texas is awesome. It's probably reason number one, to be quite honest. They were just badass. Yeah, and Alex says, hey, you know who else attacks at night? Every fucking army ever. Exactly. There's very little honor in war. You take advantage of the things you can take advantage of in order to win the fucking war. And that's what the Texan army did. And by the way, they were righteous in this. I don't care what anybody says. Granted, yes, some of the motivation, the original motivation for revolution in the first place was about the slave. I am not going to argue that at all because that is a reality. The Americans did it. The Texans did it. It's reality. It's in our past. But the other things that Santa Anna was doing to Texans, all this lack of representation. Basically, taking the fruit of the Texans' labor and the Tejanos' labor, by the way, that was all his doing. He set this up. They could have had we could still be, we could be speaking Spanish here in Texas today if Santa Anna hadn't come along and screwed things up for them. Santa Anna is really the pivot of all of this. He took a government that was, trying to expand, trying to do the right thing, and said, you know what? No, we're going to usurp all the power. We're going to depose the president. I'm going to be de facto president, and what I say goes. And how well did that work out? It's another reason why I can't stand stuff like socialism and communism because it's so centralized, and it becomes just like what Santa Anna wanted. Ultimately, and it becomes a cesspool, and that's what's in back then and today. So you think she's upset that they took bin Laden while he was sleeping? Probably. There's no honor in that. She probably was. Probably very upset with that. If you happen to find yourself in a fair fight, you're doing it wrong. That's a good point, Alex. Hey, Dr. Elo, what is up? What's up, my man? Hey, that was a short stream of yours. You must have covered the 5 things in your strip. If you don't follow Dr. Elo on YouTube, if you don't subscribe, go subscribe to Dr. Elo. Great content. Same with Alex and the Politics Show. Great content. He's got some cool interviews coming up on one of his shows that I was like kind of starstruck. Vernon Jones. If you don't know who Vernon Jones is, go look him up. He's kind of a rock star in Georgia. So that's what she said. So I'm a proud Texan. I will go back, and if you missed the beginning of this, and a lot of you did, I go into why I'm a proud Texan. And this is one of those reasons. And the fact that Jacqueline, if that's your real name, you know, mistakenly says that the things they don't teach us in school, you can go screw yourself, Jacqueline, because you obviously have never been to school in Texas, because in middle school they taught us this. And again, it's what makes me proud to be a Texan. And when I learned that we took advantage of the Mexican army just, taking a crap and falling asleep and all that, I said that was freaking awesome. In the same way that when George Washington, crossed the Potomac and took out, a bunch of British soldiers on Christmas, that was awesome. And look where we are as a result. We have the best country in the world with the best state in the world. And you can fight me on that. You want to fight me! So how is everybody doing? I would love to chat with you guys for a little bit before I call it a night or a day, if you will. What are your thoughts on Texas? Hey, Elo, have you ever been to Texas? Yeah, I would imagine in your position you have. And what about you, Alex? You ever been to Texas? And what are your thoughts on Texas? I'm really interested in knowing what Kevin thinks about Texas. Now, I know Joseph lived in Texas. He lived in the Blue Bubble. We also call Austin. We call it the Blue Bubble because Dr. Yellow says yes many, many times. Call it the Blue Bubble because that's, keep Austin weird. There's that keep Portland weird. I think the keep Austin weird came first, but neither here nor there. I think Austin's a great town. I'm not so fond of the people, but I think Austin's a great town. And the reason why I don't like the people so much is they're kind of snotty in Austin. We're from Austin, so we're better than everybody else in the state. Almost got hired and lived in Pearland, Texas. Oh, awesome. Yeah. So Pearland is a suburb, essentially a suburb of Houston. It's to the south of Houston. And it's one of the fastest growing communities in the United States. A lot of really nice houses and master plan communities with all sorts of like town centers and stuff like that. It's really nice. Kevin says one of the best nights I ever slept was in a Texas desert on a picnic table naked. Oh, I was high too. That's a little too much information, Kevin. So you were in West Texas, or were you in Big Bend? Because I can totally see that at Big Bend. How am I doing? Just fought my way through 2 hours of Atlanta traffic, and I'm a little pissed. So a lot of people don't know this, but Houston and Atlanta are sister cities, and there's a lot of things that are very similar about the two. Traffic is one of those. Houston traffic is pretty freaking bad. It's not as bad as Los Angeles. So if you've ever been to Los Angeles, they have traffic jams for no reason at 9 o'clock on Sunday nights. I've experienced it. It's the weirdest thing. I like so many things about Los Angeles. It was so strange. I was just like, I'm just appalled. It's like, why am I in a traffic jam at 9 o'clock? There's no wreck. There's nobody walking across the road. There's no protesters blocking traffic. Why am I jammed? It's because there's so many freaking people in Los Angeles. It's terrible. Alex says, I've been to Texas, Austin, and Houston. It was in the early 90s, and Houston was filthy. Nice, but filthy. Yeah, there are parts of Houston that are very kind of like filthy. Yeah, like you said, especially when you get inside the loop. So we call it, there's a road called 610, and we call it the loop. There's actually 3 loops now. There's another one that goes around even further, and that's called the Beltway. And then there's another one that goes way around. That's called the Grand Parkway. And it's kind of interesting. Houston's kind of gone through a metamorphosis even since the 90s, because what has happened is like all that filthiness that was in Houston, in the central, like starting in downtown and kind of radiating outwards, that's all gentrified now. It's all really nice and clean and everything. And it started spreading out. And gentrification been pushing out, but along with it, the kind of nastiness has been kind of pushing out as well. So there are parts of Houston that used to be pretty nice that are all kind of gross now. And now it's inside the loop, and especially around the downtown area, is all really nice. So I don't know. But then if you go outside of the Beltway and really even outside of the Grand Parkway, that's where you get a lot of really, really nice neighborhoods, really nice communities. Yeah, so there you go. And Kevin said that was West Texas. So was it in Big Bend or just somewhere out in the middle of West Texas somewhere? Because West Texas is massive, so it's all desert. I'm curious about Joseph. What about your experience in Texas? Do you have anything to share? Ah, Monahans, yes. So Kevin said he'd been to Monahan Sandhill State Park. So there's a place called Monahans, and there's actual sand dunes out there. Now you would think, okay, it seems it's Texas. There's sand dunes everywhere. There's not. Sand dunes don't exist in Texas, but there's this one place where there's a lot of sand dunes, and they make a big deal out of it. You can go sand dune sledding and all this stuff. So yeah, very just. It's out there in the middle of nowhere too. Oh yeah, so so Alex says in the just a layer of grime out on outdoor surfaces like suit. Yeah, again in the early '90s and really leading up until the early 2000s, we had a really bad smog problem in this state. And then Governor Perry basically started implementing rules for manufacturing and for refineries and stuff like that, and really turned that around. And so, in fact, our regulations in this state are stronger than the federal regulations. In some cases, stronger than California regulations. So the air here is a lot better. It's a big city. There's still some smog issues occasionally, but it's so much better than it was in the 90s. Ah, in the morning we ran across the sand dunes naked, not high. That's weird. And now I don't want that image. I need bleach on my brain, please. Joseph Clough saying he loved it here in Texas. Just too humid. It is. It's way too humid. And the bugs, they were prehistoric to me. Yeah, so that's one thing. A lot of people find out really, especially here in Houston, there's a ton of bugs. And we get tree roaches. People talk about roaches like, oh, isn't that cute? It's a little roach. It's so cute. It's about that big. And tree roaches are like this. They're massive, and they fly. And a lot of times the tree roaches will swarm together, and they will just be everywhere. So I lived in a place in central Houston. It was a fourplex, 2 stories, and we lived in a downstairs in one of the units there. And there was a front door and a back door. So one day we come out the back door to go get in our car and go somewhere, and I walk out and I turn around to go lock the door, and I look up, and the entire back of this building is covered in tree roaches. I don't know what happened next. I think I blacked out, and then I wasn't at the house anymore, so it was kind of weird. But yeah, it was the craziest thing. So yes, there are bugs galore here, and that's one of the things that always kind of surprised me about going up to like Colorado, for instance. You get to a certain elevation and there's just no bugs. I'm like, what? This is weird. Yeah, because there's bugs everywhere. There's spiders and scorpions and mosquitoes and all 15,000 different types of flies and gnats, and it's because we're in a tropical area, especially here in Houston. We're very tropical down here. Oh, you had a very thick English accent, and everyone in Texas gave me shit for it. It was brilliant. Yes, we would. Yes, we would. But we still love you. Kevin says I've applied for several jobs in Texas, mainly in the cities. Haven't gotten them, but Dallas, Houston, and Austin all have pretty interesting theater scenes. Yeah, Houston has the most theater seats in the nation. in the entire United States. A lot of people don't know that about Houston. We have a large theater district with multiple theaters here, so there's always something going on. We've got the Hobby Center, we've got Jones Hall, we've got oh, the other names elude me. Yeah, we have a very thriving theater scene here, absolutely. And that's one of the things that a lot of people think, oh, Podunk Houston, it really isn't. There's a lot of arts here. Alex says he went to some fantastic little dive bars and some of the best meat I've ever. Yeah, well, we're Texas, so yes, you're going to have some of the best meat you've ever had. A lot of dive bars in Houston and Austin. Well, just a lot of dive bars around in general, but they're great. The dive bars here are awesome. I met some of the nicest people ever. Joseph says he's loved the greenness of Austin, paddleboarding, the food, the music, and the hospitality. Yeah. So a lot of people do compare it to California in that sense, because there is, it's very hilly and there's a lot of trees and a lot of water stuff to do. Little known fact about Texas: there are no natural lakes inside of Texas. 0 natural lakes inside of Texas. And the reason why is because Texas is again, used to be an ocean. So everything under our feet outside of, Houston, but if you go inland, is limestone, and limestone is extremely porous. So water doesn't hold very well, right? So you still have rivers and streams and everything, but it doesn't pool very well because it all just kind of sinks into the ground. So basically all of the lakes outside of Caddo Lake, which is not completely encapsulated, are man-made, and we have a lot of man-made lakes. I'm right down the street from Conroe, from Lake Conroe, which is a pretty big man-made lake. Wayniak is here. What is up, Wayne? Yep, we met in sort of a dive bar, dive club, So for those of you who have heard me talk about before, I used to go to this place called Numbers. It was a nightclub. It is a nightclub in Houston. It's actually and it may be the longest running, nightclub in the United States. And when I was going there, it was kind of a goth, new wave kind of club. And that's where I met Mr. Wayniak here. So yes, there's a dive club, and it was kind of gross, but the music was awesome, and nickel beers and that sort of thing. It was awesome. Oh yeah, Joseph. So you know what, I'm going to bring this up because you have got to see these. Here we go. I'm going to switch over to my desktop view. Oh, not that one. Here, we'll go to this one because it's already over here. So if you're not familiar with Buc-ee's, shame on you. So this is, this is not working. Damn it. Okay, there we go. So there's a chain of convenience stores, essentially gas stations and truck stops, if you will, called Buc-ee's. And Joseph is talking about Buc-ee's here. If you've never been to Buc-ee's, you are missing out. You're thinking, how am I missing out? It's a convenience store. No, this is like you've been traveling for 300 miles and your butt's hurting. You've got to go to the bathroom. Your wife's complaining that she's got to pee. Your kids are in the back. And they're like, oh, are we there yet? And then in the distance, you see the smiling beaver, the Buc-ee's beaver, and all is well again. Because when you get there, even though you have to fight like 30,000 people that are there at the same time, you get in and you can get any manner of treats that you want. You want kolaches? They've got kolaches, homemade. Brisket sandwiches, the best brisket sandwiches you can buy. Sausage, barbecue, cheese, crackers, you name it. It's all there. And then they have all their Buc-ee's related candies. They have beaver nuggets, which sounds kind of sexual and gross, but these are little blisters of air that are crunchy and caramelized and sugary, and they're freaking delicious. They have a wall of coffee and sodas where you can just go out and get a gigantic thing of soda or coffee or tea or whatever you want. Free creamer, all the creamer you want, all flavors that you want. The bathrooms, you think of a gas station bathroom. If you've ever been to a gas station bathroom, it's kind of disgusting. There are people that swear that they could eat their lunch off the floor of a bathroom at Buc-ee's. I kid you not, these bathrooms are pristine. They are super clean. They keep them super clean, and they're massive. I mean, sometimes there's lines coming out the bathroom, but when you walk in, you're like, why is there a line? There's like 80 stalls in here. There's really not that many, but it's pretty amazing. Then, of course, they have all the Buc-ee's paraphernalia and the tie dyes and I shopped at Buc-ee's and all I got was this lousy T-shirt and things like that. It's just a really, really cool place, especially if you have a family and you're on the road and you see that Buc-ee's in the distance. It's like glittering in the distance, and you're like, oh, ray of sunshine comes down on it. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, Kevin says, I don't have a wife or kids, but I think that I was going crazy if all that stuff happened. Yeah, you would. And Dr. Elo knows Buc-ee's. Hey, Dr. Elo, I love it. I love that you know Buc-ee's. That's so great. So, yeah. Alex says, you love a good dive bar. So much miss to have in a dive bar. Are there good dive bars there in your area, Alex? I haven't been to, well, we've got one around the corner here that does karaoke's on, I want to say on Saturday nights. And I've been there a couple times because my wife loves to do karaoke and we do it with our friends. So, yeah, it's awesome. I do like some dive bars as well. Well, guys, I'm hearing noise in the background. I think there's some movement in the kitchen. I think that means dinner is coming. So I'm going to call it an evening. But thank you for coming and listening to me just kind of gush about Texas and put people in their place that don't know anything about Texas, obviously. And for those of you who've never been to Texas, give it a chance. Don't hate on it. We don't all walk around with a drawl. I mean, I was a New Wave kid from A-Leaf, Texas, going to the Numbers nightclub for many, many years, as Waniac can attest to. And by the way, yeah, Waniac said best beef jerky on the road. And yeah, so this is a diverse state, a wonderful state. Leave your politics at the door or not, and we'll totally accept you anyways. Yeah, so they do have them in Georgia now. It was a Texas thing, exclusive for a long time, but now they've kind of expanded. I know they have one in Florida now. They've got one in Georgia. I think there's a couple in Alabama. I don't know if there's any in Mississippi. I think there's one in Louisiana. Anyways, they've spread because they're awesome. So anyway, I'm going to take off. I might go to Buc-ee's this weekend just because. I'm not on the road or anything, but I might just go to Buc-ee's just because, well, Buc-ee's is awesome and so is Texas. Peace out.